I mean, basically what borderline is your moods go from being depressed to being very high, very very high, and being high can take two forms or many forms, but it will either take the form of grandiosity, where you think, oh man, I have great talents, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I almost to where you think, I'm going to invest in the stock market tomorrow and make millions, I know it, and it's to the point of it's unrealistic, or I'm being sent to do a great mission. Or the other thing is rage, where people, everything they say is in the form of some kind of rage and some kind of anger, and they just feel rageful and angry. That's another form of manic behavior. So maybe in this case, what was going on is that this individual was feeling rage, that they were easily triggered to become rageful.
I think about all the guys I was around, different guys, different environments and stuff like that. And it's surreal to be sitting here talking with you today about all this. It's surreal looking back, how blessed I am to be here, When I talk about, because I try to put my doctor hat on, right? I try to have, what was my experience with doctors growing up, So there's a guy that from my neighborhood. His name was his real name was Joe Gargone, but they called him Joe Black. Joe Black was a made guy in the Colombo family, old timer. Yeah, that's a young picture though. So Joe Black was probably the only Colombo guy in all of Manhattan. Colombo family is mainly like a Brooklyn crew. The Persicos are from Brooklyn, and most of the guys that are made in the Colombo family are from Brooklyn. They're known as like a Brooklyn-based family. I don't know how Joe wound up getting made with the Colombos, but he was one of the Colombo guys from the neighborhood. I think he was friends with Gioia, who was the underboss at one time, and Sonny Pinto, who my family was very close to Sonny Pinto's family. My father grew up with his son. My mother grew up with his daughter. His wife, Gloria, used to call her Aunt Gloria. And he was the one who killed Joe Gallo and Bertos. So I guess through Joe Yak and those group of guys, he became made with the Colombo family. Joe Black was caught on one side of the war. I don't know if he was on the Gallo side or if he was not on the Gallo side when there was a war, Colombo War, the first one. And he got shot with a machine gun or something. So he almost died. Got shot up a couple times, and that was his claim to fame. Well, as a kid, you look at Joe Black, you talk about playing out a role like a character. I mean, this guy was the epitome of a gangster. Always walked with his chin up like this, sunglasses. It could be any time of the day or night, right? Could be the winter time, whatever. A fedora hat, and he had this cane. He had them custom made. They were really weapons, what they were. It was a cane with a heavy gold ball at the end of it. He had them specially made for himself. And I know why he carried it, just so he could crack somebody if he had to, right? And he would just, I don't even think he really even needed the cane, but it was part of his charisma, right? And the way he talked, it was like, everything was like a raspy voice, right? So from a kid, I'm looking at him like this guy's like the real life, like Darth Vader, the top coach, the whole thing, right? So he was very close with my family, like my grandfather Fatty, my uncles. He knew our families knew each other all our lives, And excuse me 1 second, because that's our mutual friend.
Oh, okay.
One of our mutual friends.
All right.
You know who we kid around. We call him. He talks like this with his hands.
Oh, yes.
You know what I'm talking about, right? Everything is he's gonna watch this later on after we get done editing this video, right? What we call him, Tai Chi. Everything and then when he orders, we go out to eat to lunch with him. He'll call the waiter or the waitress over and go, like it's a secret, right? Why does he do that? He doesn't want us to hear.
I don't know.
There's this guy that orders. I got to explain to everybody. When he orders, he calls. We're at a round table, right? All of us, great bunch of guys. Love it, love all of yous, right? And then he'll call everybody's ordering out what they. Hey, Carl, what are you having? I'm having the meatloaf. Frankie, what do you eat? I'm going to have a burger. This one's having this, and then he'll go like this. All right, it's his turn. He'll go like this to the waitress. Come here, right? Whisper in her ear, and then we don't find out what he ordered till he gets it. Like, why go through all of that? I love the guy. You know, he checked on me when I wasn't feeling good.
Oh, it was nice.
Because when I didn't show up that day, I wasn't feeling that good.
Yes.
I was under the weather.
He's a thoughtful guy, that's for sure.
Yeah.
You know.
But I was him calling. Anyway, Joe Black had a club on, his first club was on Mulberry Street, between Kenmare and Broome. That was the first club that he had. If you walked in his club, it was like back in time. Sinatra would be playing, or like some gangster songs, like the old, 50s band type music, and all pictures on the wall of when he was out in the Copacabana, or he's out with the long collar, shirt, ties. You had pictures with everybody. And it's like, it's almost stepping back in a real nostalgic place, I would get out, let's say, go to the tailor shop, because my family owned 1 Hour Martinizing. They had a bunch of those in the city. And my grandfather Fatty used to own a tailor shop on the corner. So I was always around. So Joe used to tell me, Joe used to box when he was a kid. He was like a really good boxer. And then obviously he never went pro, or maybe he did go pro, but I don't know what his career was. But he was heavily into boxing. He tried to get his son into boxing. But the son was nothing like the father. I'll get into the son in a little bit. Joe one day, he's telling me about this doctor, this hand doctor that operated on his hand. Something happened with his hand or whatever, and he's talking about it and stuff. So he mentioned it a few times. So one day I'm hanging out. I must have been, I don't know, maybe 18, 19 years old. He goes, hey, he was always by himself. People knew Joe Black, he was nuts. People liked him and everything, but I think, again, he wasn't a guy that hung out with a lot of guys. He was kind of like a lone ranger, right? So anyway, he goes like this to me. He says, hey, I got remember that hand doctor I told you about and everything else? He says, yeah, I got him coming down here. He said, so I'm standing there talking to him. Cab pulls up. Who gets out? The doctor gets out. And the doctor looked like a doctor. He had glasses and, he was dressed nice and all that stuff. He gets out and he introduces me to him. He goes, Frank, this is Dr. So-and-so. If it wasn't for this guy, my hand would never be the same. And, telling me how great of a doctor he is and stuff. He said, Doc, come inside. Why don't you have a drink? So I'm getting ready to go because I want to leave them together. I'm thinking, okay, no, Frank. He says, come in with us. So I don't drink. So anyway, I go there. And then Joe says, hey, Doc, what are you drinking? Doctor said, oh, well, I have a shot or something like that. So he said, Frank, go behind the counter over there. So I go behind the bar. I'm being nice about it. I pour the guy a shot, seltzer water for a chase or whatever you wanted, stuff like that. Joe goes and closes the door, right? Goes over, he's talking to the doctor. They're talking. Out of nowhere, right? Just grabs the guy. I can't laugh. It's not funny. Grabs the doctor's hand, okay, and starts cracking him with his cane. And then cracking him over the head and beating the shit out of him. And screaming at him, going, you mother effer, how do you like it now? How do you like it? How does that feel? So me, I didn't know this was going to happen. Beats the shit out of the doctor, grabs his arm, he's telling me, hold his arm. Held his arm. He gets the cane, and he didn't stop till he broke the guy's hand. And then he stopped. He told the doctor, how does that feel? And obviously the doctor was crying and he was begging for his life. He tells me, he goes, Frankie, get him a cab. So now here I am. I open up the door. I run out. I held down a cab. He threatens the doctor, says, you say a word about this, you're going to be, there's not going to be no more, I'm going to kill you, right? Doctor's hysterical. Can't wait to get out of there. Terrified. He walks out holding his hand like this. I'm walking the doctor, stick him in the cab, and then off he went. We're going there, and Joe's going, could you help me clean up? Because now there's blood all over the place. And I'm helping him clean up the club and stuff. I never forget that.
Well, there's two things there. Two things going on there.
More than two things, right?
The first thing is a great narcissist, right? A feeling of entitlement. The doctor screwed me up, so I'm entitled to beat up the doctor. That's narcissism. It's a good example of what they call narcissistic. Number two, sociopathic. Look at what rules am I breaking? This guy deserves a good beating. I mean, I had a hand. He's a doctor. I went to him. He's supposed to fix up my hand. What does he do? He screws up my hand. Well, you know what? This guy deserves a beating. So I have a right to do this. And, there's no rules that really prevent me from saying that I can do it. So that's a good example of those two things.
So now Joe Black is a narcissist sociopath.
Well, narcissism is part of the sociopathic picture. Sociopaths in general do feel entitled to do what they're doing. I'm entitled to do this because this is my reason.
I had the doctor feel.
The doctor was...
although
I will tell you, there's probably a lot of people that have had experiences with doctors that feel exactly that same way, but are inhibited from doing something about it. They wouldn't do it, but they would walk away saying to themselves, I went to this doctor and he said he was going to fix me up. And what happened? I ended up worse from what he did. And in their fantasy, might say, I'd like to get that doctor. They might have some violent dreams, but they don't actually, there's something that inhibits them from doing it. Whereas in the case of this gentleman you're talking about, there was no inhibition to stop him from doing it.
I tell you what, when I was an avid cigar smoker, I love to smoke cigars. If I smell somebody smoking a good cigar, I could tell what a good cigar smells like. If you hear doctors talk shop, you know what I mean by talking shop, okay? I'm not saying every one of them should get their hands broke like that, but I made friends with a lot of doctors in the cigar lounge because they would go there after whatever they were doing, Some of them would come in their scrubs and just hang out like normal people. But then there was a time where there was about maybe like four of them together, and they were talking shop of what went on in the day and talking about patients. It was disgusting. How the lack of respect, and you think they care. I'm not saying every doctor's like that. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying there's doctors that don't care. I really believe there is. You're one of them. But man, they were talking shop. And you would have lost respect for a lot of them because they were talking stuff. I got in my car and I'm like, here's one thing, for example. I'm gonna keep their privacy. I'm not gonna say who they are. But let's say, they would make fun of a guy who was scared of a needle. And they would say, yeah, see that guy, he came in, he was that big muscle guy. He was like a little bitch when I put that needle in him. You see the way he turned his head and he was almost crying? They made fun of him, Stuff like that. But even more like serious stuff,
Well, I can tell you it does relate to my own business in a couple of ways. First of all, I never talk about patients that I have in counseling. And many people, psychiatrists, psychologists, master's level, they'll go out to coffee and they'll say, oh, hey, I had this patient, he lost his wife, and do you believe what he was going through? And never, ever, ever talk about patients as part of a social gathering to tell someone, to make your stories interesting to other people. That's a sort of narcissism in itself. But I come across it a lot with people in my
So
profession.
I'm not,
No,
I'm saying,
you're. The other thing is, I find that people that work that used to work in mental health settings become jaded about the suffering of patients. So when you do have people that hear things and see things and are out of it and do weird, goofy things, after a while you become jaded and you lose your sense of humanity toward them. After a while they become a joke. You don't care if you lock them in a room. You don't care what you do, because you've become jaded toward that person. That's where the inhumanity in the whole mental health profession comes in. So it definitely applies not only to the medical doctors, but to the whole field of mental health as well.
well, it's no different than these prosecutors, judges, and lawyers when they get together at happy hour and they talk about cases, and you're just a happy hour conversation. I know that for a fact. They'll go there, they'll talk about cases, they'll talk about how many years they gave out. You know, you'll have a judge he'll brag about how many years he gave out total for the year.
Mm-hmm.
And like they're trading notes. How many years did you give out so far?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I gave out 300 some years. They go, well, I got you beat by 20. You know, and the prosecutor's like, yeah, I prosecuted so-and-so. What'd you prosecute? And they're talking shop, as they call it, talking shop, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you listen in on those conversations, I'm not saying every judge is like that, every prosecutor, every lawyer, just like not every doctor is like that, or anybody in any profession. There are people out there that talk shop. And if you listen in, you look at them, it wakes you up and you go, wait a second. Like, you know, you go into a doctor or you're going to a lawyer and then they're talking about you. As soon as you leave the room, you're a happy hour conversation, or you're in a social setting where they're smoking a cigar and they're talking about you.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
And whatever the profession, it really shows the degree to which that person has become jaded and has lost all respect for what they're doing and for the people that they're dealing with.
It pisses you off. Back to Joe for a minute. Joe had a son. Well, Joe passed away, but the son tried to emulate the father. There's a picture of the son. He tried to box like the father. And the father was very close with Nicky Scarfo. Nicky Scarfo was the boss of the Philadelphia family years ago. He's a known public figure. You probably heard of him before. Here's what I'm getting at. There's a picture with the son on a boat. I don't know if they'll probably pull it up of the picture. There's a picture of him on a boat with Nicky Scarfo. That's how close they were. Like the son would go to Philadelphia and Nicky would give him carte blanche. Okay, so you see Nicky over here?
Mm-hmm.
This is Joe Black's son. You know, right next to him. You know, so that's how close. So I remember when Nicky got indicted, and he got life. It was Joe Black's birthday. Nicky sent Joe Black from jail a birthday cake, and Joe Black was hysterical crying.
He was so touched by the sentiment.
Like, oh my God, you know, the last thing this guy should be thinking about is my birthday. He's doing life, and look at this, and staring at the cake and crying. And well, the same guy who, with the doctor and all this stuff. It was
I see.
So that's Joe Black's son.
Yeah, okay, that's his son. Well, yeah, I mean, you know, I can understand that. He still had things that he felt sentimental about.
Okay.
You know, I mean, he still had
so
things.
One day you could break the doctor's hand like he thought you his hand up. So I'm gonna his hand up. You know, eye for an eye. Right? The next day, your friend sends you a birthday cake that's doing life, and you're hysterical crying because you're touched by it.
Well, but I would imagine, so this is something that I'm imagining is, you know, when you get into a certain kind of society, it has its own rules. It's not functioning anymore by society's rules. It's functioning by the rules of its society, if you see what I mean. So if you have a bunch of sociopaths and they get together, they're functioning according to the rules of the sociopathic society. So our rules, we can feel sentimental about this, or we can do violence about that. That's just our society, the way we function. And it's different than the way the other people function.
So the way the mob,
It's a society within a society, if you think of it that way.
right? We lived by different codes and
Different,
ethics, and
yeah,
it was a different system than the regular system.
different way of looking at life entirely. So what makes you laugh, what makes you cry is kind of different than what ordinary society would laugh or cry about.
You know, today, honestly, I really feel bad for that doctor. But back then, I didn't feel bad for him. I'll be honest with you. He told me to hold his hand, hold his arm up against the bar over there. I did what he told me to do.
Mm-hmm.
The guy was getting his hand broke. I didn't flinch.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't tell him to stop, nothing. I did what he told me to do. And then I walked away like nothing happened.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I'm saying, well, Joe's right. He f***ed his hand up, he f***ed the doctor's hand up. So back then, the way I was thinking, my thought process, 18, 19 years old, I'm like, well, the doctor had it coming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so your own process, when you start to think back on that, given to where you're at now in your life, you see it as differently. You have a different perspective on it.
Yeah. Today, I really feel bad for that doctor because the doctor really probably thought he was doing the right thing by Joe. Maybe the outcome didn't turn out that he's not in control of, And then he goes and gets his hand busted up. But then again, too, a lot of doctors don't think that's going to happen to them.
Well, that's true.
Right? They don't think they're going to come back and try to do the same thing to you, But, Joe Black's son, he was, I got to say, I don't remember him being a good boxer, but he tried to emulate the father.
Mm-hmm.
But then what happened was he liked to coke too much. He liked to party, so he stood out drinking a lot, sniffing. And then with that, he don't work out no more. And he had kind of a big mouth, And I see there was a time where he was in shape. He probably could take most of the kids in the neighborhood. But then as time went on, he got lumped up quite a bit, with his mouth. But Joe Black is one of the legendary guys.
So I've seen documentaries on Scarfo. So they say he was very violent, but this person was close to Scarfo.
Yeah, very close.
But he survived, so he didn't.
Well, Joe was in a different family. I don't know how he got close to Nicky Scarfo. I don't know how.
Oh, I see.
But
I see.
Yeah, you could be real close to. You could be in a different family. You could be with the Chicago outfit, let's say. Okay, which works under a whole different system, right? And I could be with a New York family, Lucchese family. But you and I have a really good friendship, and we're like family. We could be really close. So nothing prevents us from having a relationship. And people might say, well, how did they get to be friends? And then they'll say, okay, well, Carl met Frank in Scottsdale. Then from there, they met each other. Then, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Or so-and-so introduced them. The uncle introduced his uncle. And, So I don't know how Joe got so close with Nicky Scarfo, but he was so close with him that if you look at the picture, that's why I wanted to pull it up. You had all Nicky's crew there, and the one that was right by him is Joe Black's son. Yeah. That's how close he was with him.
Yeah.
So there was definitely a mutual respect there. And yeah, Nicky Scarfo was one of the most, they say, one of the most violent guys around. But Joe had, there was another time Joe, he was always around. Every day I would see him. He was always that wise guy that was always around the neighborhood, right? And he was always looking to Shylock. He was, he had a Shylock book. He used to bookmake a little bit. But he was a real street gangster, One day he had to collect money, He says, hey, what are you doing? And you don't know what's going to happen with Joe, That's not. He said, you got about like 2 hours. He said, you want to take a ride with me to Brooklyn? I says, yeah, why not? I jump in his car. He had a Cadillac, right? We drive out to Brooklyn. We go to a restaurant. I remember he ordered a veal Bolognese. He went in there with his cane. He walked in. It was right out of the Godfather scene, right? I'm sitting there, and he says, give me a veal cutlet with a salad on top, the veal Bolognese and everything. Give him the same thing. I remember him ordering that for me. Then we had that. Then we had some espresso, you know, and then he had to meet the guy that had to pay him. I'm thinking, I'm ready for anything now because I'm saying, watch, he's going to call the guy. Guy's going to start getting cracked or whatever, tell me to do something, right?
Uh-huh.
But the guy came in, he handed his envelope, was, you know, terrified of Joe. And then we got back in the car, went back to the neighborhood, you know. One thing nobody liked about Joe Black was in the crap games. You're familiar with craps, right? So you bet the right side and you bet the wrong side.
Uh-huh.
So the right side is you're trying to make the point. So if somebody rolls the points of 6, everybody's rooting for the 6, right? Well, the wrong side is a 7. But the odds are better to bet a 7. But nobody wants to get a 7 because you crapped out.
Yeah.
Joe would come on Grand Street. Grand Street was like a big game, big crap game. I used to go there with Joe Beck a lot. It was on Grand Street right off of Mulberry, right next to Sal's Barber Shop, right? So like a real old-time place. You knock on the door, they look through the peephole, they see a familiar face, they let you in. And when you went in, there was a cafe, but then in the back they had a real live crap table. Every wise guy from all over would be there, you know, gambling. And everybody's betting the right side. Nobody's betting 7. Because you look like a, you know, Joe Black would walk in, throw all his money on 7, hit a 7, take all the money and run out. I can't tell you how many times Joe Beck used to say, that motherfucker, that But Joe Black would walk in with his fedora and everybody knew. Everybody knew. He wouldn't say nothing. He'd come in and go against the whole place. The only one betting 7.